Welcome in, everybody, to the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast, powered by Full-Time Fantasy and the FFWC. I'm your co-host, Bily Muzio. With me, as always, my co-host, Jody Smith. Tonight, we're going to be skipping the review of Week 4. We're going to just dive right into the Week 5 preview. There's a lot of things that have been shaking up the landscape of the fantasy space. We had the injury to Javonte Williams, which affects tonight's games as well. We're going to be talking some Mike Boone. We're going to be talking some Latavius Murray. We're going to be talking about a lot of other plays this week for Week 5 that are bound to be hitting some of your fantasy lineups. So stay tuned. We'll get started right here after this intro.
Welcome to the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast, presented by the Fantasy Football World Championship, home to the industry's most accurate rankings.
It's go time, Jody. It's Thursday. We get some Thursday Night Football tonight. We have Broncos versus the Colts. The Colts are not shaping up to be the team that we thought they were going to be. I mean, you and I had them slotted for, I think one of our favorite lines preseason was over under 9.5 wins on the Colts. I'm starting to be a little sketched out about that bet that I made live on air now. I'm not quite sure they're going to make it there. Tonight, 3.5 point dogs to Denver Broncos. Who do you have tonight, Denver, or do you have or are you going with the Colts tonight?
Well, I mean, your reasons to be concerned about Indianapolis are legitimate. It's the only team so far that didn't manage to defeat the Texans, who haven't looked good basically, the whole year. And it's kind of weird. Could potentially be the third year in a row or third quarterback in a row that Indy has tried this veteran cast-off Band-Aid and it's not working out for them. In this game, you're looking at teams that are both kind of been offensively challenged so far this season, and now we're in a situation where both of them are missing their starting running backs in this game. So it kind of makes me think that points will be at a premium. Denver's defense has been very good. Indy's hasn't performed up to what we were thinking, but they still can have a good game here and there. So when I did my Thursday night football preview for Full-Time Fantasy, I kind of was on the Colts to cover the 3.5 spread, but I'll go back to last week when I was under. I wrote it at the time. It was 47.5, and it actually went up towards the end of the game, so it was under 49, and that was an easy one. So for this game, I'm kind of on the under again. It's 42.5, which is a little low, but when you look at the projections for Matt Ryan and a banged up Colts offense, they're not looking so great in this offense. I mean, in this game. So, they will be challenged, I think, to get close to 20 points against this defense. So that kind of makes me think that the under's in play here. But I wouldn't blame anyone for just staying away from this one and hoping we get anything that's worth watching, because last Thursday game wasn't as good as some of the other ones we've seen. Wait, what was last week? What was the bad one? What was last week was the Cleveland-Pittsburgh. That was the first one that I got wrong this year, because I thought that I thought Pittsburgh would cover, and then they had the ball at the very end. They could have, but instead they turned it over, and Cleveland ran in a touchdown. So they're one that spread.
42 on the over/under, 3.5 points still are Denver 3.5 point favorites. Money line right now, Denver is at -175, Colts at +150. Let's talk real quick. I want to talk about some Mike Boone. I want to talk about some Latavius Murray. So Latavius Murray made his 2022 debut last week after filling in for an injured Kamara. Looked actually pretty spry. Looked pretty quick. Actually looked pretty good for his age.
Yeah, he's inactive tonight.
But I mean, he was definitely atop the waiver bids at the FFWC. So Latavius Murray, Mike Boone, the two most bid on players, they both went 44 times in the World Championship. The average bid for Mike Boone was $373. The average bid for Latavius Murray was $216, but this is where it gets a little interesting. The max bid was higher on Latavius Murray, $605 versus $589 for Mike Boone. They both had a pretty similar minimum bid, $49 versus $64. Mike Boone favorite there. How do you see this backfield shake up? Have you ever seen a week where there has already been a starter on an NFL team that, and for fantasy perspectives, there's a starter already here with Melvin Gordon, and both backups are going for over $300, $400 on the waiver wire? Can you remember a time where you've seen anything like that? I was trying to remember that today. Somebody asked me that question, and I couldn't think of anything.
I can't think of that because, Melvin Gordon himself, when he's holding onto the ball, is a legitimate NFL running back and a solid fantasy option in his own right. So normally we would be embracing the fact that he now gets a chance to be the feature back, the three-down back himself. Instead, I think maybe we're all kind of overreacting to the fumbles, which, they're a little, obviously a legitimate concern, because it feels like if he has a fumble in this game, he's going to be exactly what we saw last week, which is he didn't even see the field again. So that's always going to be a risk. I'm sure that they worked on it, at camp or in practice this week. I don't know. The Latavius Murray, when it was like, when you're telling me those numbers and those bids, that felt a little bonkers to me, because he is 32 years old. He's been a journeyman on and off teams. Clearly, if the Saints really, thought he could be something that could help them moving forward, they wouldn't have tried to slip him back to the point where he could be signed by a rival just so quickly. So, and then Mike Boone, a little bit of, kind of an unknown. He's been playing a little bit on third down, and he's looked okay, I guess, as a receiver. We saw him kind of get the run down the stretch last week, and he looked he looked pretty good.
So Mike Boone's been in the NFL since 2018. He was undrafted. Went to Cincinnati College. He's now at 27 years old. The thing about Mike Boone, though, is he's got a 100th percentile burst score. So he definitely has a big burst. Definitely strong as well. He's definitely flashed in the NFL at times. He's got a pretty good career average right now, 6.7 in 2022, 8.8 yards in 2021. Again, not a lot of attempts, though, so small sample size here. But on in areas that he had, larger sample size, 2019, 49 rushing attempts, 273 yards, so 5.6 average there. So I'd be interested to see what he's able to do with a larger share. I'm really hoping it's Mike Boone, but them going out and signing Lat Murray that quickly had me a little concerned about Mike Boone. Do they fully trust him? We saw last year in the game that he was kind of the feature back, and it just kind of busted, right? And so are we going to see it again this year? I still think Melvin Gordon is going to be the workhorse here, but if he does fumble, because we've seen 4 fumbles now through 4 weeks for Melvin Gordon, and 2 of those he lost. So if the ball gets placed on the ground again, and let's just say that he gets benched, do you have do you have Mike Boone, or do you have Latavius Murray as the lead back if Gordon continues his fumbling issues?
I still would favor towards Boone. He's already entrenched into the system, man. Yep. Like you just rattled off he's got that burst. I actually didn't know that he had such a. It's because he's been so underused throughout his career. He's just one of those guys that, I guess, in the fourth quarter of a game that's long been decided, he'll break off a 25-yard run here and there. But it just feels like to me, with those numbers you threw out of what people were spending on Murray, that seemed a little crazy to me, because I wrote, as I always do, I do the fab budget recommendations for full-time fantasy. Of course, I wrote that on very, very late Sunday night and into Monday morning, and I had Boone at that time as the top pickup, and I mentioned Murray, but I had Murray, significantly further down. I think I want to say. I don't even know if he managed my top 5 recommendations for the week, but yeah, I clearly would. Yeah, I've got him, quite kind of bit down there. I I've got
Where do you
Boone.
have him in your rankings this week? This was one I was kind of playing around with. I think I'm probably higher than consensus on because I think there's a chance that we just mentioned it. Melvin Gordon fumbles again. Boone could see the field more, but where does he come in your rankings? Let's go to our running back rankings. I'm going to post the link in the chat for everybody. So for those that are following along, you can just click on that link that's inside the chat coming in right now over on the YouTube channel, and you can click that and follow along. But Jody, where's he on your rankings this week?
Yeah, I'm going to have to. Are we talking Boone still?
Let's just run through. Let's look through just the Broncos in general. Where do you have Melvin Gordon this week?
I want to say I have Gordon at around RB20. I feel like right now he's got a chance as long as he holds onto the ball. I think he's got a pretty good chance of getting into the end zone, and as long as he's able to average around 4 yards a carry and like I said, holds on to the ball, it feels like the kind of game where he's going to get 15 plus touches, and that's to the point where he's entering the RB2 conversation. So that's probably about where I have him. Boone, I think I might have in the 40s this week. I'd have to look to be sure.
So I just pulled him up. Let me take a look.
Gordon is my RB20 at the moment, and Boone, he's down there somewhere. I'm not seeing. RB35. So he's a little bit higher than I was thinking off the top of my head, but that's just.
We're in the same exact spots. I have Boone at 35, and I got Gordon at 20 as well.
That's funny.
Where do you have?
You know what? Considering that you're top 10 for the season, which kudos to you, by the way.
Thank you, sir.
We didn't want to do a recap, but that's actually, it's always impressive to be able to do that. But here you are as the number one draft last year, you're top 10 so far this year. And I'll tell you, as someone who's had a fair bit of success doing this has been a bonkers year. So for you to be top 10, you're doing something right. Extremely impressive, as always. I feel like I learned something.
It's a lot of pressure now here, Jody. You just put the pressure on me. You got to keep it up. But it's
don't change the process. Do what you're doing. Like I said, I'm relieved. If you're telling me that we're on the exact same at this moment under both of those guys, I'm feeling pretty good about it.
Well, let's take a look at over-under. So Vegas has Melvin Gordon rushing yards at 61.5. They have Mike Boone at 30.5. You look at the Colts' fantasy points allowed to defenses this year, and they're about middle of the pack, 15th, 16th overall. They're allowing 16.9 fantasy points per game here to the running back position. That's not just one running back. That's the collaborative position, the running back. Oh, that's quarterback. Sorry, I'm on the wrong. Oh, my God. Here we go. I'm failing.
There's 15. You're right.
Yeah, about 15th. 22.13 fantasy points. So middle of the pack here again. Just got lucky that both the quarterback and the running back position were about the same. So 302 rushing yards on the season they've allowed. They have also allowed 3 touchdowns. They've also allowed 173 yards through the air. Do you think Melvin Gordon's also going to see the passing down work of this offense? I thought he was when Javonte was on the field, but Boone's been involved in the passing game as well. Do you think that Boone's going to start maybe challenging him for reception work?
This might be a situation, Billy, where we actually see the Broncos just dedicate entire drives to one back or the other. And if that's the case, maybe Gordon plays 2 and Boone comes in for 1, rather than Boone coming in and being a third down back per se, or a change of pace guy. Maybe they just say, hey, let's go with an entire drive, because it's not unusual for teams to do that. Gordon's been fine throughout most of his career as a receiver. So I don't see any reason why they would feel like, well, let's just go ahead and take him out and put in Boone, because Boone, he's looked okay this year, but it's not something that he's ever really excelled at throughout his whole career. He's never been the kind of guy that's been able to supplant the guys in front of him and come in and carve out that kind of role. And like you said, he's 27 though, so you feel like he would have probably gotten the opportunity to do that if it was going to be a part of the game. So the over-unders you mentioned are interesting, because what it tells us, if they're projecting around 60 rushing yards for Gordon, well, that's your 6.5 fantasy points there. And if he's catching 2 or 3 balls, rack up another 5 points there as a receiver. So you're already in double-digit fantasy points. And if he gets into the end zone, boom, then he's right there. He's he's top 20, which is where we have him.
Naheem Hines is the other interesting one tonight. So Jonathan Taylor ruled out yesterday. Nyheim Hines, not your, prototypical 3-down back, but has shown capable when given the chance. We don't want to see it all season. His body won't be able to handle it. But for one game, he should be fine. Over under 34.5 yards for Nyheim Hines tonight. Over under on reception yards, 27.5. This seems a little low for Hines, in my opinion. So how much are we expecting Deion Jackson tonight? How much are we expecting Nyheim Hines? If you have to project a split tonight, where does that land?
Well, what's interesting is rather than Deion Jackson is Philip Lindsay. That's the one that we're kind of curious about, because I looked at some DFS projections that had him pretty respectable. I want to say he was somewhere between 6 and 8 points, and that made me scratch my head like, hey, hold up now. That seems like for a guy who was just signed off the practice squad and it was just activated today, that seems like a pretty good estimate. I guess maybe they're looking at the hashtag revenge game narrative here for him going against the Broncos, which is interesting because, a guy that never fumbles versus Melvin Gordon, who's in trouble for doing just that.
So Lindsay's over-under is actually 37.5, 3 yards higher than Nyheim Hines on rushing.
That's telling me something very interesting. It's telling me that somebody's legitimately expecting him to come and contribute, which I can see why people would be skeptical then of Hines in this week. But really, when you look at when Nyheim Hines throughout his career has had opportunities, he's been really, really good. In the games when he's had double-digit touches, I think he averages over 14 fantasy points per game. And I looked, I think I wrote it up this week in one of my articles. The last 2 times he's had double-digit carries, I want to say he averaged 17 PPR points per game. So that's pretty impressive. And I don't see why they wouldn't go ahead and give him double-digit touches. I mean, 7 to 8 carries doesn't seem out of whack, and then he's normally going to reel in 3 to 4 balls as it is. So there's your double digit right there. Like I said, he's been extremely productive. As someone who always goes back and tries to watch Texans games, he's the kind of guy that it feels like I've seen him in NRG Stadium come in and they'll take Taylor out and they'll put Hines in, and he always manages to somehow get a touchdown, which is kind of puzzling. That's classic Texans. But the takeaway for me here is somebody smarter than you and I, Billy, is expecting Philip Lindsay to come in and be pretty involved. So, I can see why he's extremely cheap in DFS. So I'm getting ready to do a showdown lineup or a captain lineup tonight. I'm jumping all over that. I mean, he's like $200 on DraftKings or something like that. I mean, he's pretty much a must play at that point. But I still like Hines. I still think that he's a little bit, in my projections, he's a little bit behind Melvin Gordon, who feels a little bit more secure, but I don't have any problems with. I've recommended to people. I don't. This is why you've had Hines on your roster for 4 weeks. This is the opportunity. So, I'm going to go with the numbers and what he's done and with his opportunities in the past. I don't have any issues at all with plugging him in as your RB3 tonight, RB2, RB3.
Okay, let's run through, and just so that's enough for Thursday Night Football. Let's kind of run through. We had a couple start-sit questions, and then we'll hop into some other fantasy-relevant news for the Sunday slates. And it's not official, but I'll touch base on these again on Saturday night when I do the solo pod for Grind Time. But let's take a couple questions here. The first question is, would you take Tonyan or Ingram this week?
Well, I mean, it's great that Tonyan got into the end zone last week, but from a consistency standpoint, he's just not getting enough targets to be someone I'd be interested in. I don't see a lot of upside in Evan Ingram, but the matchup's pretty good against the Texans. I don't think that Houston has really any shot in this game. I think Jacksonville's going to be, pretty upset in this week. So, my initial preview of this game is I think Jacksonville wins pretty comfortably. So, and with Green Bay, like I said, I mean, Tonyan, he got into the end zone last week, but he hasn't been very consistent. And then you got to factor in that they're traveling and it's not a home game and just other things for me. It just depends. That's a risk reward thing. I mean, with Tonyan, if you're putting him in your lineup, you're banking that he's going to score because he's not a consistent part of Green Bay's passing attack, which is underwhelmed as it is, but he's not the kind of guy that's getting 4 or 5 catches a game and 50 to 60 yards anyway. And if he gets into the end zone, it's bonus. He's a guy that you're banking on. Hey, he's got to score or it's going to be a bust. And with Ingram, he's more of a, there's limited upside with Ingram, but I feel like he's safer.
Yeah. So Tunyon last week, 2 receptions, 2 targets, one of which went for a touchdown. You take away that touchdown, and he only has 4.2 fantasy points in PPR leagues. Where Ingram, on the other hand, looking at his game logs, last week was a little ugly. He only went 1 for 1, but prior to that, 3 targets, 8 targets, 4 targets. Where Tunyon has seen 2, 5, and 7. So mixed bag for the most part, but I do feel like Ingram has been more involved. I mean, the last 2 weeks not so much, but quite frankly, both these are just ugly plays.
It feels like there might be better options on the waiver wire. I mean, clearly there's not, or if someone's bothering the ass out, they must have clearly waited on tight end. It's dry out there, which I understand.
Honestly, like I'd rather go towards someone like Juwan Johnson, or
see that.
Who's seeing the field a little bit more. You look at snap counts; he's on the field a little bit more. He's seeing 4 to 5 targets a game, 30, 40 yards a game. So we're talking about bottom of the barrel plays here, but Juwan Johnson is going to see, I think, a little bit more time with, especially when you have Mike Thomas, who's possibly missing another week, and Jameis Winston, who's probably going to be out another week. So Juwan Johnson, definitely a candidate, I think, with these mixed bag of tight ends. I think you hit the hammer on the nail, Jody, is you're banking on a touchdown from Tunyon just because the usage hasn't been there. So I know I missed this one last week. I said Evan Ingram, and Tunyon did get the touchdown, but 1 of 2.
Well, the process is right. I don't know anyone who would have recommended Tunyon, considering that he hasn't done anything this year.
Yeah, it's been hard to start Tunyon. It's been hard to start Ingram as well the last couple of weeks, but I'd still go with Ingram, especially with the matchup this week. We have nope. Here we go. Sorry, those are the wrong ones. Here we go. Here it is. Who would you start this week, Lawrence or Wilson?
Oh man, I've got them ranked like back to back.
I have back to back too.
Yeah, I want to say that I moved. This is me off the top of my head. I think I moved Aaron Rodgers down behind both of them, so that moved Russ up to around QB 12. So Lawrence is either 11 or 13. So it's basically a pick 'em. It feels like to me, Trevor Lawrence has more upside in this game. He's already thrown more multiple touchdown games than he did all during last year. It's a pretty inviting matchup against the Texans, and he ripped apart Houston in his first game of his career last year. And I think in the second game he wasn't near as good. But the Texans, like I said, I feel like Jacksonville's going to win this game, going away. So it feels like it's like I said, it's a tough call. It's a thing of tonight. Hate to say this, but when you make a call on Thursday and you're thinking about it and you make the bad call, you've got to sit on that pain, that anger for the next 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
When the guy you could have started was on Sunday. Of course, that works both ways, because if we tell you tonight to sit Russell Wilson and he goes off for 300 yards and 4 scores, you'll be pretty upset. But in that argument, at least Lawrence has a chance to come in and match it later versus the retrospect where we come in this game. Like I said, I'm kind of on the under here. So if Russ comes in and he plays like Russell Wilson did in weeks 1, 2, and 3, he's going to be in that QB 13 to 17 range, which is just fine. It's the same area that I have Lawrence, but it just feels like, for me, Trevor Lawrence has more upside.
Yeah, I have Trevor Lawrence here 2 spots ahead of Wilson in my rankings this week. I have Aaron Rodgers in between them. So in order, I have Lawrence at 11, Rodgers at 12, Russell Wilson at 13. Thursday Night Football just sucks. Like every week, it seems like there's an under in Thursday Night Football. It just seems to be a battle. We don't see the fantasy points that we're expecting. We're not going to have the defense loading up the box as much, facing Javonte Williams or, now it's Melvin Gordon. It's not as feared, I should say. So they might be playing a little bit more cover 2. So it may hinder Wilson. So I think that Wilson hasn't been great this year, and you hit the hammer on the nail, Jody. You said it. Lawrence has actually had a couple more multi-touchdown games, so I'm going to go with Lawrence over Wilson this week, especially with the matchup against the Houston Texans. So I like that call as well. PPR flex, start two of them. Bateman, we can't answer this question. There's just too much unknown. So Bateman is questionable. Josh Reynolds is questionable. So as of right now, you're forced to start Godwin and Lockett based on today's news. But come ask this question, Chris, on Saturday. There's just too much information for this one to be answered right now. How about this one, Jody? Play Sutton, Pittman, or McLaurin. You can only play one of those guys? What is this, like a one receiver league?
Sutton, Pittman, or
McLaurin.
Sutton is going to be the highest rated for me in this one. Pittman, it's a guy I love. He was fantastic against Houston in week 1, but since then it's been kind of going downhill, and I don't see that necessarily changing against this secondary, which has been playing really, really good. The Broncos, I want to say, are in the top 5 or top 10 in points allowed. They're number 2. They've given up the second fewest fantasy points to wide receivers so far this season, including 1 touchdown. So 1 TD reception so far allowed by the Broncos. So it's a legitimate reason to, I think, be wary of Pittman. He's probably not the kind of guy that most people can afford to bench in their leagues, but given a choice from him and Sutton, it's going to easily be Sutton for me. And the third choice was who?
Third choice was Terry McLaurin.
McLaurin's interesting this week. It feels like he's due. I think I tagged him on our rankings as a guy that it feels like this is a good rebound opportunity for Washington. But I'm not going to,
especially with Jahan Dotson out, possibly.
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly see it, but I don't know that I would have the stones to bench Cortland Sutton over McLaurin.
No way.
I mean, even though I don't think it's necessarily a great spot for Michael Pittman, I don't know that I would, again, be able to sit him for McLaurin, even though I feel like of the three of them, McLaurin might have the most upside, in this week when you look at the matchup and the fact that he's kind of due. And like you said, Jahan Dotson missing this game, it feels like a potential. I don't want to say the word blow up spot, but it feels like a spot where McLaurin get into the end zone, or he can get you a 100-yard game, something like that. But given a choice, he's still probably third in the group.
So it looks like we have an update. He's asking us to pick 2 out of those 3. So for me, I'm going to go Sutton, Pittman still. McLaurin, though, is definitely an interesting play.
Probably agreeing with you there, but if you want to give yourself a little breathing room from tonight's game, why don't you just go with Sutton, and then you've still got an opportunity to watch, McLaurin play on Sunday. But again, I personally don't like Pittman's chances of getting into the end zone in this game, but he's still around top 20 wide receiver. He's around 20th or 21st, something like that in my rankings. So he's not a guy that, you can easily just dismiss.
Next one, we have somebody asking about stashing. Are we stashing, where is it? Noah Brown, Marquise Callaway types? Noah Brown, I think for sure. I mean, you look at this offense and he's seen 5 or more targets in every single game. 9 week 1, 5 week 2, 7 week 3, 6 week 4. He's seen 54 yards or more in every single contest. You're talking about 10 fantasy points plus in every single game almost, except for last week with 9.1. So I definitely think that Noah Brown is worth a stash. What about you?
Yeah, and he did it in that first game with Dak Prescott. He was looking just fine in that role. Remember, they liked him enough where they didn't even have Jalen Tolbert active for several games. My only concern moving forward will be when James Washington comes back and is healthy, if he slides into that number 3 spot and it reduces Noah Brown down to wide receiver 4. But I haven't heard any updates or progress on James Washington, so that may be a while before it happens. And hey, he was a veteran just signed to a 1-year deal. So if they still like Noah Brown, they're not going to be obligated to, slide Washington in their lineup. He's got to, get in there and earn those reps and all. But definitely somebody that I think is worth stashing.
Okay, is Romeo Dobbs a must start now? I know.
He's
I
getting
mean,
he's getting pretty
there.
close to it. I mean, it feels like he's emerged as their number one, even more consistently than Alan Lazard has. And of course, with the way Aaron Rodgers is kind of struggling to come up with anything from that offense and from those receivers, at least we've seen Dobbs now be the guy who has gotten the healthy targets in multiple games in a row. So, yeah, I mean, it's getting pretty close. It just depends on the construct of your league, how deep it is, and right now, I think looking at Dobbs, I would view him as a pretty comfortable between, say, wide receiver 30 and 40 overall. Like if we were doing a redraft, or if I was just doing weekly rankings, I think he'd be in that wide receiver 3 range. And you could argue that he's around the same area or even ahead of Lazard now.
Jody, somebody had him really high in their preseason rankings. And loved the Green Bay landing spot. I'm not going to say who that analyst was, but
has this person had any success in draft rankings before?
Yes, a little bit last year. So very happy. Very happy to see my boy here starting to pick it up.
You think that same person really liked George Pickens too?
He did, yes. He did. I actually have a bet with my draft partner, Dave. And at the beginning of the year, I was like, oh, man, I'm not liking my odds right now. But it was Romeo Dobbs, straight up fantasy points, PPR league, versus Curtis Samuel. And this was preseason. And the loser has to buy a steak dinner in 2023 in Vegas at the next draft. At the beginning of the season, I was like, oh, man, I'm not liking my odds. How do you like your steak cooked? Right. And now I'm feeling a little bit more confident. Dobbs has picked it up a little bit. Wentz has looked like shit. So
Dotson being hurt doesn't help you in that cause, at least in the short term. But
not helping this week.
At least it can be respectable now.
Yeah. So how you liking my odds, Jody? Dobbs versus Curtis Samuel for the rest of the way.
I don't know, man. It feels like it's pretty close. It feels like Dobbs is the kind of guy who's going to have the bigger blow up weeks, the more more touchdown upside, and Samuel's going to be a little bit more like you expect out of a guy from the slot, more of a consistent PPR option. I don't hate the call. I think, like I said, it's been encouraging to see the last couple of games how Dobbs has kind of stepped up and been their main guy. So, I'm sure you feel a little bit more confident.
Yeah, eight targets the last 2 weeks. So you
need Dotson to hurry up and come back so he can,
help those odds.
Times towards Samuel.
All right, next start-sit question: Njoku or Everett? I would be leaning Everett here, especially if Keenan Allen's out, but Everett was also added to the injury report today with a hamstring injury, so I think that's something we have to monitor. This might be a forced start lineup depending upon the injury news. We'll see what shakes out towards the next practice, but you never like to see late adds to injury reports.
No. Agree. Given a choice, all things are equal. They're all healthy. I probably would have Everett 1 or 2 spots ahead of Njoku. So it's kind of a coin flipper, but I feel like Everett's been more consistent, whereas Njoku just had that one huge game out of nowhere, and then he's been a little bit quieter in the other weeks. So.
Connor's just want to let everyone know he's starting Pacheco this week. Best of luck to you.
Pacheco?
Yep. Injuries, he said. Let's go.
Do what you got to do.
This has been a common question for this week. It's been on Twitter. It's been on our Discord channel. It's also now here on YouTube. Are you taking a gamble tonight on Boone if you're at a tight spot at running back? Or do you want to maybe list me a couple running backs that are similar in your range that you would start him over?
Well, we hit on him, so I thought he actually came out higher than I thought when I'm looking at him down around RB35. So I feel like it's not a terrible spot. Guys that are in that same range in my rankings, you're looking at Chase Edmonds, Travis Etienne, guys like that.
Cam Akers.
Yeah, you feel like with those guys, we kind of, unfortunately, and as much as we liked Travis Etienne and Chase Edmonds coming into the season, One thing I've always said as a writer and analyst over the years, I picked this up somewhere a long time ago, but typically after about 4 weeks, we kind of know who teams are. Things can always change, but through 4 games, that's a quarter of the season. Well, used to be. A team that really struggles against the run is most likely going to struggle against the run all year. And that works offensively too. But a team that's running the ball really well is going to be able to run the ball probably most of the year as long as they don't get too many injuries or whatnot. So it feels like in this grouping of players, after 4 games, we kind of know who they are. And it's been unfortunate for, like I said, Edmonds and ETN, because Bily, you and I were both extremely high on them. We drafted them in Kings Classic. And, it's been pretty disappointing. Edmonds has been basically usurped by Raheem Mostert as kind of their main starter there, and he's just playing a little bit of a passing role. Same thing for ETN, who James Robinson, freak of nature, has kind of taken on the starter role there. So, to me, when you're talking guys in this range, it helps people to do your own rankings and projections and whatnot. It might come down to pure, raw opportunities. I'm adding up how many projected carries I think this person's getting and how many targets they're getting. So, whoever has more opportunity in this game is the guy you go with. Discount things like touchdowns when it comes down to just pure raw opportunity. And that's what I'd lean towards. And, looking at the projections and analytics for this game, I mean, like I said, Boone, he's got a shot to come in and play like I implied at the top of the show. Maybe he comes in and just gets entire drives to himself. And if that's the case, you can see a path to 10 touches for him. So.
Okay. Next one we have is Pittman or London. That was close.
Yeah, that one's getting close. Feels like with, both of them are unquestioned number 1 receivers on their teams right now. But with Pittman, it's a rougher matchup. Can't remember off the top of my head. The Falcons are playing
at Tampa Bay.
Yeah, it's not particularly a good matchup for them either. The Bucks have been where's the Bucks when it comes to against receivers? 17. So they're kind of average. So I think I may have them back to back in my rankings. I can pull them up real quick here and look at it. But
I have them very, very close. So I have London actually. Where'd it go? I have him 2 spots behind Pittman, but it could really go either way. It's going to break down to whoever gets the touchdown here. If Pittman gets the touchdown, he's probably going to pass London. If London gets the touchdown, probably going to pass Pittman. If they both get a touchdown, I lean Pittman.
I've got London 1 spot ahead of Pittman currently.
Okay, so pretty close. So I lean Pittman. Looks like you lean London. Sorry to not be of any more help there for you, Mr. Jones. That's on you now. We got full point PPR, Stevenson or Wilson. Jeffrey Wilson.
I'd like some clarity on who New England's quarterback is going to be first, because we heard that Mac Jones is maybe potentially starting. I'm anticipating it's going to be the rookie. Interesting there. It feels like Stevenson's clearer path to targets. What do you think?
I'm just going to go Wilson here. The Niners haven't really played anybody behind him, and Carolina's middle of the pack. They're 15th. They've allowed 21 running backs on average to the running back position. Niners probably get a lean on the running game. I'm going to go with Wilson here.
Yep. Let me look at. I've got my personal rankings at the moment. Wilson is 18, Stevenson 24. So I guess I'm agreeing, even though it felt like I'm really interested in that matchup against the Lions, because the Lions have just been getting gouged on the ground. So it feels like, and this could be a potential blow-up game for Stevenson. The only caveat there is clearly that when they get around the goal line, it's going to be Damian Harris territory. So we need Stevenson to kind of either catch a touchdown or break one from outside of 5 yards to hit his true potential in this game. But love matchup.
Okay. I got a couple more questions here, and then let's get a couple touch base on a couple more lines, and then we'll get off before football, so we can all go watch some football. Would you make this trade, Breece Hall straight up for Olave? Which side do you like more?
Well, I mean, it's always difficult to answer, especially in a format like something like Twitter, because you're missing context for leagues. Like, are you starting 3 receivers? Is it dynasty?
Mm-hmm.
Is it half PPR? Is it full PPR? And just Olave for who was it again?
Olave for Breece Hall.
Breece Hall straight up for Olave. Let's just assume it's a redraft. Yeah, I would consider it if I had 2 comparable good starting running backs and Breece Hall was my RB2. Now, if you're trading Breece Hall, who's your second running back, and you're getting down to where you're having to play scrubs or having to just stream guys to do that, well then, no.
Yeah,
but like I said, it's very difficult to answer those questions without context and something forum like a chat window on YouTube or Twitter. It's hard to give at
Yeah, you need to see the lineups, the rosters. You need to see how many you're starting in each position. If it's a 1 running back league, I'm more inclined to trade away Breece Hall. If it's you're starting 2 running backs, I'm less inclined. I don't know who your other receivers are. I don't know who your other running backs are. There's so much here out of context.
Considering the lack of depth at running back and the fact that here we are without 2 elite options in this game, one of them for the rest of the year, just makes you think, like, all things being equal, I might want to stick with the running back here.
I also have a golden rule that I just don't really like trading away a running back unless I'm getting one in return. And it's a little old school, but when you're in confined leagues, those running backs are just a little bit more valuable. Tournament play, you're shooting for upside. You're shooting for, the top tier receivers who are getting the most volume. And then you're also trying to hit on later round running backs. But in this scenario, I'm assuming it's a confined league. So I'm going to say I lean on the Breece Hall side, because you also look at snap shares, and Breece Hall continues to see more snap shares. He continues to see more routes run. He's kind of developing into this true workhorse back. So I think as the season progresses, we're going to see more and more and more of Hall. So I would stick to Hall on this, unless it's like a 3 wide receiver league and you're only starting 1 running back. So again, we just don't have the context to fully answer. Okay, let's do a couple more. Last question, and we'll get to some last minute stuff, and then we'll get ready for kickoff. Dart throw, wide receiver to half point PPR, Noah Brown, Josh Palmer, or Duvernay. I think a lot of this information depends on
the health of Rashad Bateman.
The health of Rashad Bateman, also the health of Keenan Allen. So, Nadi, why don't you ask this question on Saturday when I'm doing this Saturday night, and we'll have a little bit more clarity on both of these receivers. And if for whatever reason we don't expect CeeDee Lamb to miss time, but if CeeDee Lamb does miss time, that catapults Noah Brown to a number 1 wide receiver role. So I'm not expecting that, but it is a possibility. It's football. You never know. What were some of the biggest? I mean, outside of this week, so let's go back to waiver wires. This was a crazy week in waiver wires. Outside of Boone and Lat Murray, who were some of the other names that you saw go that you were most surprised about?
Well, I just had that pulled up and closed it to look at something. So since I've moved forward now, it's not coming to me off the top of my head. So fill in for me while I pull up my the waiver article again.
So we saw Deion Jackson go. I didn't see Philip Lindsay go in any of my leagues. I think people expected Deion Jackson to be there. Caleb Huntley was another big name that was added a lot. So let's talk about Atlanta backfield. This is going to be one that I think is going to take some deciphering. So Tyler Algier probably steps into majority of the lion's share here, but Caleb Huntley also proved to be a valuable asset last week for Atlanta Falcons. Also, in another week, we get Damian Williams back. We have Patterson out for the foreseeable future for 4 weeks as he hit the IR spot. How are you shaking up this backfield, or are you just going to avoid it altogether?
Yep, I just pulled up my article. I had Algier's the guy that I prefer because he's got a more stable role as he's guy who's going to get targets, where Huntley maybe has a little bit more touchdown upside because they probably would trust him as the bigger back. He'd probably be more of the short yardage option there. So generally, I'm going to prefer Algier there. But interesting usage last week. I think they played the exact same amount of snaps and had the exact same amount of carry. So expecting that to carry over, you're looking at a 50-50 split. So in a game against Tampa, where the Bucks are a touchdown plus favorite, I would say that the game script this week is going to favor Algier well ahead of Huntley because of that role as a receiver. So a few of the other guys that I mentioned, believe it or not, that Raheem Mostert's still available in like half or more leagues. Brian Robinson was the guy that I mentioned in case people were forgot about him or the fact that he hasn't played in 4 weeks. He's out there a lot. Michael Gallup should have been picked up, say, prior to last week, but he's still available in about half of leagues. And then another guy that I recommended was Isaiah McKenzie, whose role should only be more secure moving forward with Jamison Crowder looking at missing a pretty lengthy amount of time, if not the rest of the season with a broken ankle.
Where do you put Khalil Shakir in now? Or did you move him up your rankings for the rest of the season?
I haven't. Yeah, I need to update my rest of season rankings. That's something that we actually talked about earlier. Yes, but you're talking. So remember Isaiah McKenzie last year when he was Buffalo's wide receiver 4. It's pretty much the same offense. So he's going to have, if Shakir is the unquestioned number 4 there, he's going to have a couple of pot games. He's going to have a game where he catches a 30 or 40-yard touchdown, or another game where he puts up 60 yards and this and that, but it's not going to be a consistent performance. He's a guy you can justify rostering in expanded leagues or in formats where you're rostering, 20 players or something like that. But, like I said, I don't envision in this particular offense, I don't envision him being someone that it's going to be that you're going to clamor to get it, in your lineup, or that he'd need another injury to, be someone that you could be like, okay, well, there's some potential here.
Okay, last piece I want to talk about before we hang it up tonight, go watch the football. Kenny Pickett made his NFL debut. He saw 50% of the snaps alongside Trubisky, who also saw about 50% of the snaps. What do you think this means for this offense? Do you think you get a boost with Deontay Johnson? Does this help anyone? Does it hurt anyone? What's your takeaway?
Well, when you look at the numbers last week, it certainly worked out pretty well for your boy, George Pickens, because I want to say he had 100 yards, right? 102, something like that.
Off the top of my head, I don't know how many yards he had, but
I think he had triple digits, and Freiermuth had a pretty good game too. I don't know. It felt like Pickett was more willing to get in there and launch the ball. Now it could have been a game script with them being behind and trailing, and him just heaving the ball up there. You saw some good. He got in a couple of touchdowns, but you saw some bads. Did he throw 2 or 3 interceptions? So, but it's the right call. You have to move forward. Trubisky has been far worse than I thought he could be this year. The Steelers are reeling right now at 1-3. That streak of Mike Tomlin always making the postseason, it doesn't look like it's going to be extending another year, but you have to see what the rookie can do. It should help, pretty much all the receivers, but, looking at his the half of action that he played, it seemed like he was more willing to push the ball downfield. So I don't know that it necessarily helps Deontay Johnson, but it's not like Johnson was having great outings with Mitchell Trubisky. So yeah, it probably helps everyone in the offense a little bit.
Yeah, you can't think it can't be much worse than Trubisky has been. So it's going to be.
I mean, I thought, Billy, we talked before the year. I was like, Trubisky, there's some upside there. He can't be any worse than what Ben Roethlisberger was last year. I apologize for that. I was wrong. He was.
He was much worse.
Yeah, he's been worse.
Well, I think that's it, Jody. Let's wrap it up. Always a pleasure to talk football with you. Love it. Everyone, I'm going to be back here Saturday night again, doing a later evening show once we get all the final news and injury reports in. It's also nice to do it a little bit that late because I get some news from Rappaport, and we also get all the beat writers talking about who's supposed to be playing the next day. So I'll accumulate all that information, and then we'll do a start sit podcast.
Yeah, hey,
and
not to interrupt, but in a week like this, where if you look at your roster, probably half or more of your players have a Q next to their name, or an I, or maybe even an O or a D. So this is the kind of week where you really need to tune in on Saturday and get those last minute things answered, because tomorrow practice participation will be crucial tomorrow, because guys that have been limited or haven't practiced this week, tomorrow is the big day. Because if they're out again, then that basically means you can pretty much write them off. But if they're able to at least participate tomorrow, then that's really telling.
And as a reminder, folks, we have another early game in London. So wake your ass up and set your lineups.
Agreed.
I don't even see how that was a talking point this week.
I was. I'm not surprised that you got so much feedback, but it was like, somebody called you Rambo and
I love the little gif you made of me of the Rambo.
If somebody invented a way where, like, I would front money for a fantasy league, and I'd do all the drafting and all the work for you, and if it wins, I send you the profit and I get nothing. I think if I created a service like that, that would sound great to so many people. And it's like, I know that sounds in jest, it sounds good, but it's like, this is supposed to be fun. You're supposed to work for it. You're supposed to be, it's like watching your favorite team. You're supposed to have those ups and downs and emotion, and you're supposed to take some pride in your own team, your own roster management. And it's not up to someone else. Ultimately, and I tweeted this the other day, the credit and the blame ultimately relies on whoever hits that submit lineup button. Whether you want to go out and vocally blame somebody else, whatever, you're the one that made the call. So, I don't know.
Yeah, a lot of pushback on that one. It was interesting to see. I was not expecting that type of pushback or that type of engagement from that tweet. It was just me letting people know, like, that's on you, man. Like, if you didn't wake up, that's on you. Don't be bitching to your commissioner. Don't be bitching to your league mates about it. That's on you. So, reminder, everybody, one more early game this weekend. So, wake up early, set your lineups. Let's go watch some football, Jody. Have a good night, everybody. We'll see you all back here on Saturday night for Grind Time. Take care.